For decades, this mountain was the world's highest graveyard, a place of sublime beauty and brutal consequence, where the line between triumph and tragedy is thinner than the air above 26,000 feet. For every story of a summit, there were whispers of bodies left behind, frozen in time. That danger was part of its legend. But in the early 2022s, that legend soured. The danger escalated into a full-blown crisis. In 2023, a record 18 people died trying to reach the top. The mountain had become a symbol of chaos, overcrowding, and a commercial enterprise spiraling out of control. The world watched in horror as the headlines got worse and worse each year. And then, something changed. In 2025, the death rate on Mount Everest dropped by an astonishing 72%. From 18 deaths just 2 years prior, the season saw only 5 fatalities, and only 3 of those happened above base camp. This wasn't a fluke, and it wasn't just a season of good luck. It was the result of a radical and deeply controversial overhaul of how we, as humans, interact with the world's highest peak. A series of strict new rules and life-saving technologies were rolled out, designed to finally tame the mountain's deadliest impulses. So, what exactly changed on Everest in 2025? We're going to explore the regulations that ended an era, the technology that rewrote the rules of survival, and tell the gripping human stories of the climbers and guides who faced this new dawn on the roof of the world. To really get how revolutionary the 2025 season was, you first have to understand what it was like before. You have to look back at the old Everest, an era defined by a lethal mix of raw nature, human ambition, and unregulated commercialism. The story of Everest has always been one of risk. From the very first attempts in the 1,920 seconds, climbers knew they were stepping into a world not meant for human life. But in recent decades, the nature of that risk began to shift. The mountain didn't change, but the people on it did. It all starts with what the mountain does to your body. Above 8,000 meters or 26,000 feet, you enter a place known by a chillingly accurate name, the death zone. Up there, there's only a third of the oxygen available at sea level. If you were instantly transported from a beach to the summit, you'd pass out in minutes and be gone soon after. Starved of oxygen, your body simply starts to break down. The simplest tasks feel impossible. Your digestion stops working. Your brain gets fuzzy, leading to confusion, hallucinations, and catastrophically bad decisions. 2 specific conditions haunt the high slopes: HAPE, where your lungs fill with fluid, and HACE, where your brain swells inside your skull. Both are swift and merciless killers. This invisible enemy has always been the greatest danger on Everest, but by the 2010 seconds, it was being supercharged by a new man-made threat: the crowd. The commercialization of Everest, which really took off in the 1,990 seconds, turned what was once a pursuit for elite alpinists into a bucket list item for anyone with a big enough checkbook. Expedition companies popped up everywhere, some offering guided trips for tens of thousands of dollars. On the surface, this opened the mountain to more people. In reality, it created a system where wealth, not necessarily experience, became the main ticket to the top. This flood of amateur climbers had a predictable and devastating effect. The problem hit its horrifying peak in the spring of 2019. A photograph taken by climber Nirmal Persia went viral. It showed a dense, single-file line of climbers waiting to get to the summit. It was a shocking image. But the danger wasn't just the absurdity of waiting in line. The danger was where they were waiting, in the death zone, on a knife-edge ridge with a limited supply of bottled oxygen and their own energy draining by the second. Climbers were stuck for hours, exposed, their bodies slowly shutting down. 11 people died that season, many of them stuck in that very queue. The world was outraged, but little really changed. Then came 2023. That year, the chaos of 2019 was compounded by unpredictable weather and, some say, a continued decline in the average climber's skill. The result was the deadliest season in the mountain's history, with 18 confirmed deaths. The climbing community was heartbroken. Sherpas, the backbone of the entire Everest industry, were dying. Clients were perishing from exhaustion and altitude sickness, sometimes just meters from the top. The headlines were brutal. Everest was no longer an adventure, it was a spectacle of death. The mountain and the industry around it had finally reached a breaking point. The aftermath of the 2023 season was a brutal wake-up call. The international media depicted Everest as a circus of incompetence and tragedy. Veteran mountaineers, who had warned for years about this, were now screaming, "I told you so." But most importantly, the pressure was finally mounting on the one group that could make a real difference: the government of Nepal. For years, the Everest permit system was a golden goose for the country. Permit fees brought in millions of dollars annually, a vital source of revenue. This economic incentive often won out over safety concerns. The government was reluctant to bring in stricter rules that might scare climbers away. But 18 deaths was a public relations disaster they couldn't ignore. The message from the global climbing community was clear: fix this, or your most reputable customers will leave for good. Top-tier guiding companies began to question if they could, in good conscience, keep operating in such a dangerous environment. Behind closed doors in Kathmandu, a series of tense meetings took place in late 2023 and 2024. Representatives from Nepal's major expedition operators, senior Sherpa leaders, and government officials gathered to confront the crisis. The debate was intense. On one side, the economic reality. On the other, the moral and reputational cost of doing nothing. The Sherpa community, who carry the greatest risks on the mountain, were a powerful voice in these talks. For too long, they were the ones rescuing inexperienced clients, hauling immense loads through the most dangerous parts of the route, and paying the ultimate price when things went wrong. They pushed for changes that would not only protect clients, but would also professionalize their own jobs, demanding better training, better pay, and more respect. Finally, in early 2025, the Nepalese government announced a sweeping set of new regulations. They were more comprehensive, more stringent, and more ambitious than anything seen before. It was a clear signal. The era of the old Everest was over. Business as usual was no longer an option. The government was finally choosing safety over sheer numbers. And in doing so, they were about to reshape the future of climbing on the world's highest peak. The 2025 regulations weren't just one new policy, but a multi-pronged attack on the key problems that had plagued the mountain: inexperience, overcrowding, and poor safety. It was a system designed to work together, with each new rule reinforcing the others. The single most impactful new rule was designed to fix the root cause of so many disasters: inexperienced climbers. For years, you could be incredibly fit but have zero high-altitude experience and still sign up for an Everest expedition if you had the cash. That ended in 2025. The new regulation was simple. To get an Everest permit, a climber now had to show proof of having already summited at least one other Nepalese peak over 7,000 meters. This might sound like a small bureaucratic hurdle, but it was revolutionary. A 7,000-meter peak is a serious undertaking. It forces climbers to prove they can handle the brutal cold, the thin air, and the technical skills of Himalayan climbing before they even get to Everest. This rule immediately filtered out the tourist climbers. It ensured that everyone on the mountain had a real understanding of rope work, acclimatization, and the sheer physical and mental toll of a major expedition. The result in 2025 was a group of climbers who were more competent, more self-sufficient, and way less likely to become a danger to themselves or their teams. The second major change targeted the expeditions themselves. Solo climbing was now strictly prohibited with severe penalties. More importantly, the government mandated a minimum guide to climber ratio, at least one guide for every 2 climbers on 8,000-meter peaks. But it went further. It wasn't just about having a guide. It was about having a qualified one. The new rules required guides to be certified, either by an internationally recognized body or through rigorous, specialized Nepali training programs in climbing, rescue, and medicine. This professionalized the role of the Nepali guide. They were no longer seen as just strong porters, but as certified mountain professionals responsible for their clients' safety. This ensured every team had expert leadership making the critical calls on weather, turnaround times, and a climber's health. The days of budget operators cutting corners on guide services were over. To solve the deadly overcrowding, Nepal took a 2-pronged approach. First, they significantly increased the permit fee for foreign climbers from $11,000 to $15,000. This price hike acted as a natural filter, making the climb a more considered decision and subtly reducing the total number of applicants. Second, the culture on the mountain shifted towards staggering ascents. Expedition operators, working with government officials at base camp, began to strategically schedule their summit pushes. Teams worked together to avoid having everyone aim for the exact same weather window, spreading climbers out over several days. This, combined with a smaller pool of more experienced climbers, helped eliminate the bottlenecks. The result was a smoother flow of traffic, which meant less time spent waiting in the death zone. Perhaps the most futuristic change was making new technology mandatory. Every single person on the mountain was now required to carry a GPS tracking device. This created a real-time digital map of the mountain. From base camp, an expedition leader could now see the exact location of every team member on a screen. If a climber stopped moving for too long or got separated, an alarm could be raised instantly. It took the guesswork out of search and rescue. Instead of searching a vast, frozen landscape for a missing person, rescue teams could go directly to their coordinates. This was a massive step forward for mountain safety. While not a new rule, the 2025 season saw a dramatic improvement in the use of another piece of technology, the helicopter. For years, helicopter rescues were mostly limited to the lower mountain. The air at extreme altitudes is just too thin for most rotorcraft. But by 2025, a combination of more powerful helicopters and incredibly skilled pilots pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Pilots like Captain Maurizio Fellini and Captain Bibek Kadka became legends, performing daring long-line rescues from as high as Camp 3 and even above. In a long-line rescue, a specialist on a cable is lowered from a hovering helicopter to pluck a stranded climber from the mountain. This was a complete game changer. Climbers with severe altitude sickness, who in the past would have faced a slow, often impossible descent, could now be evacuated from 23,000 feet and be in a hospital in a matter of hours. The Himalayan Rescue Association reported that these high-altitude helicopter operations saved multiple lives in 2025 that would have almost certainly been lost in any prior season. The whir of rotor blades above the Khumbu icefall became the sound of hope. Statistics and rules only tell part of the story. To really understand the impact of these changes, you have to look at the people who lived through this historic season. Imagine a veteran climber, Anna, on her second try at Everest. Her first was in 2019. She remembers the chaos, the fear she felt watching people who clearly didn't belong there struggling, the unnerving hours in the queue. She turned back disillusioned. Returning in 2025, she was skeptical of the new rules. But what she found was a different mountain. Her teammates were all seasoned climbers. Her guide was a certified pro who led with quiet authority. The climb was still brutal, but it felt organized, controlled. When her summit window came, her team moved efficiently, without the frantic rush or the soul-crushing lines. The mountain felt just as wild, but the human circus had left town. Now consider a senior Sherpa guide, Lakpa. For 2 decades, he'd worked on Everest. He carried the ghosts of friends he'd lost and the memories of clients he couldn't save. For him, the 2025 rules were a revolution. The guide certifications and better wages brought new respect and security to his community. The stricter client rules meant he was guiding partners, not just carrying passengers. The GPS tracker on his pack and the knowledge a helicopter might actually reach him gave him a sense of security he'd never had before. The work was still dangerous, it always would be, but for the first time, he felt the system was designed to help bring him and his clients home safely. But even in this safer era, Everest didn't give up its dead. The mountain always has the final say. The 2025 season still saw 5 fatalities. 2 of those stories are a stark reminder of that. Philip II Santiago, a 4-5-year-old climber from the Philippines, was on his summit push. He was experienced. But as he ascended, he became exhausted. He reached Camp 4, the final camp before the summit, and laid down in his tent to rest. He never got back up. Just days later, Subrata Ghosh, a 4-5-year-old from India, successfully reached the summit. He stood on top of the world, but the descent is often the most dangerous part. Weakened and exhausted, he collapsed just below the Hillary step on his way down. Despite his guide's best efforts, he couldn't be saved. The deaths of these 2 men, both experienced climbers on good teams, underscore a critical truth. You can regulate the climbers, but you can't regulate the altitude. Even with the best preparation and technology, the death zone is a place where the human body can simply give out. And yet, there were stories of survival that would have been impossible just years before. One report tells of a climber at Camp 3 who developed a severe case of HAPE. Her lungs were filling with fluid. A descent on foot would have been a death sentence, but her team radioed for an emergency evacuation. A helicopter was dispatched, and a long-line rescue plucked her from the side of the mountain. She was flown to a hospital and made a full recovery. Her life was saved not by luck, but by the systematic use of communication, technology, and daring piloting, the hallmarks of Everest's new era. So, why did the death rate on Everest plummet in 2025? It wasn't one single thing. It was a complete change in philosophy, paid for with the lives lost in the chaotic seasons that came before. A system that demanded real experience ended the era of the unprepared tourist. A system that mandated professional guides ensured better decisions when it mattered most. And a system that embraced technology gave every climber a lifeline and every rescue mission a fighting chance. The 5 deaths in 2025 prove that Everest will never be safe. The loss of Philip Santiago and Subrata Ghosh are heartbreaking reminders of the mountain's ultimate power. But the dramatic drop in fatalities proves that it can be made safer. It proves that many of the tragedies of the past were, in fact, preventable. The Everest of 2025 is a different mountain. The era of mayhem seems to be over, replaced by an age of regulation and responsibility. But this raises a final, profound question. In taming its deadliest impulses, has something of its wild spirit been lost? Is a safer Everest still the same ultimate adventure that has captivated us for a century? And maybe the most important question of all, can these changes last? Or was this just a brief moment of calm in the long, violent, and beautiful history of the world's highest peak? If you found this look into Everest's new era fascinating, consider subscribing for more stories from the world's most extreme environments. And let us know in the comments if you think these changes are for the better. We read everyone.